Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. We're out here in the desert today test driving the 2024 Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness, the new Uber off-road edition. Yeah, so we're gonna have a good look at it inside and out. We're gonna take it for a drive, and then I'm gonna tell you what I really think. For 2024, Subaru actually gave the Crosstrek a number of design enhancements and updates across the board on all the different trim grades. But one of the biggest one is a new trim grade, the Wilderness. And what this is close to the top of the model line, and it is an off-roady version that not only gives it visual differences, but it gives it functional difference as well. So as if the Crosstrek weren't already a formidable off-roader and a soft-roader, an overlanding type vehicle, this is a trim grade that really goes to the enthusiast to give them a little bit extra out here in the bush, as well as, well, out there camping and doing other things. So the one that we have right here is priced pretty close to the top, $35,000 and some change. It has a number of options on it. And so what do you get for that money when you step into the Wilderness? Well, first of all, you can see that there's quite a few differences here. A redesigned front fascia that's got a more robust look, a little chewier and chunkier, LED headlights. Down in that unique fascia is a set of LED fog lights that are actually a hex design, very cool. Underneath, you're going to find a real metal skid plate here that's going to help driving out here on some of these rougher trails, keep you from scraping some of the more important bits and pieces that are there. You might still scrape up that skid plate, but some of the things that keep you getting home aren't going to get hit. Wheels and tires, unique 17-inch alloy wheel and Yokohama Geolandar all-terrain tires. Now, these aren't super chewy, aggressive all-terrain tires. They're actually sort of a more consumer-oriented design, but they're far better than the street tires and wheels you're going to get on most other Crosstrek models. The best part about them is they've got a taller sidewall, so they are offering a better ride out here, but also protecting that wheel a little better from going over rocks and things like that. Body cladding, bigger, thicker, chewier body cladding, has a nice texture on it. That is going to help protect this car, again, out here in the bush, with trees and branches trying to scrape you. And look at the cladding along the lower. Now, you're either going to love it or hate it. It's larger, it's thicker, but it also says Crosstrek in big gold letters. Very cool. One big thing you might notice is the stance. This actually has a higher ride height, just a little over a ½ inch taller, increased ground clearance. That's important. That is not only visual, but it's functional. And how we get that ground clearance is taller struts and springs. That's important because a lot of people out there with the Subaru Crosstreks, and I see them here in the Southwest, they're adding lift kits, which are great. They look cool. They really increase the off-road capability, but when you do that, you get ride height, but you don't necessarily get increased suspension travel. This has increased suspension travel because the struts and springs are actually taller. So that's two different ways in which you have better capability with the suspension that's unique to the Wilderness. Also unique to the Wilderness, badges. There on the door, you can see a beautifully done inlay badge, also out on the rear deck. Another item that really makes this car pop from even across the parking lot is the flat black applique on the hood. It is a big sticker, yes. It is graphics, yes. There is some function to that actually that really sort of helps off-road by reducing glare and reducing some of the reflections that you might get off the paint, especially with a bright color like this. From the rear 3/4 angle, we can see how this extra ride height that this has really does impact the overall stance. And granted, my camera's set down at an angle that enhances that, but this tire wheel combination, along with this body cladding that's unique to the Wilderness trim grade, really do give it a tougher look. And when it comes to the tougher looks, the rear bumper is unique here. It's got the gold accents on it, Subaru block lettering across the back. And the approach and departure angles, because of the unique fascias on this and the raised ride height, are somewhat better than you're going to find on the other Subaru models. And you can see those there at the bottom of the screen. I just can't remember them off the top of my head while I'm standing here talking about the car, but there they are. The other thing I wanted to point out here is this roof rack. Standard on the Wilderness is this ladder style roof rack with very nice looking gold accents. This can hold 700 pounds static weight up there, which means you can put a healthy tent up there, among other things. All right, my friends, are we ready to take a drive? We're out here in the desert. We're going to start right here and do everything else after this, because driving out here on the trail, I think, is one of the most important parts of the experience with the Wilderness trim grade. So as I said when we were doing our walk around, this has 1/2 inch extra ground clearance, which really helps give a little bit more confidence out here on a trail like this. Because these are taller struts and springs, we're not just lifting it up, we're actually giving this car better suspension travel, which is better for articulation when going through tighter spots. So the ride and the feel of this car is very nimble, and that's because it is based on a car, and this is not a large, tall, heavy crossover SUV compared to many of its competitors. I do find that because this has the taller sidewalls, this ride is just a little bit more forgiving out here on the trail than some of the other Crosstreks I've brought out here that have the larger 18-inch wheels and lower profile tires on them. And so that's a nice thing. And of course, because of this small footprint, maneuverability is very good. The steering has a nice lightweight feel, and this car feels pretty solid. Even though the ride is somewhat harsh, it is a stiffly sprung car, it's not causing the structure of this car to feel like it's anything less than robust. Now it's time to try the washboard road and see how this thing's really bolted together. As always, this is one of my favorite places to drive any off-road oriented car, truck, or SUV, and that's because no matter how capable a vehicle is off-road, this ribbed washboard surface can really make a car feel like a major POS if it's not bolted together and tuned right. So what I'm finding here is this pretty strong rhythmic surface is sending some rattles and some rhythm through the structure of this car. You can feel it. You're on a washboard road, and some of that is mostly felt in the suspension, but that is typical of other Subarus that I've tested out here. It's just the way they tune their cars. The important part is I'm not getting any rattling in the dash, rattling on the interior. The doors aren't vibrating in their frames. That happens in some vehicles. And the nice thing is the tuning of the traction control and stability control systems in this car are done such that you can throw this thing around a gravel curve at a little bit of speed, and it really helps keep this thing in check. It keeps it from sliding out on you unless you really get crazy. These Geolander tires, especially on this gravel, feel like they've got pretty good bite. I'm able to throw it around these corners and give it some turn in, and it just turns. I'm not getting a lot of slide and push like I do with the street tires found on the standard Crosstrek and on the Limited. So the washboard road checks out. One more thing worth pointing out before we get to the pavement drive is the fact that when you step up to the Wilderness and the higher trim grades, you get an expanded array of X mode drive modes that give you a few more choices as to how to set the drive modes on the CVT and the four-wheel drive system so that you can handle more varieties of terrain: mud, snow, rock, sand. You get more variety in how to set this and control how the traction is divvied up than you do with lower trim grades. And because you're going to be out here probably putting the drivetrain to a little bit more stress, this also has additional cooling for the CVT that helps keep it a little bit cooler under pressure when you're crawling up hills. But more important than that, it actually increases the towing capacity on this to 3,500 pounds. On the pavement, this is a vehicle that I think rides better than the rest of the Crosstrek line, and that's, again, because of these taller sidewall tires. You've got a little bit more rubber isolation between you and the bumps, the potholes, the speed bumps, all of the things that upset life behind the wheel. These tires have a pretty good level of grip on the pavement, and they're pretty quiet. This has a 61.5 decibel rating on our 70-mile-an-hour highway test. Really not any higher than a standard Subaru. You don't hear these tires. As I mentioned when we were doing our walk around, these are more consumer grade all-terrain tires, so they don't have an aggressive tread that's giving you that hum like some of the aftermarket choices do. Steering has a nice light feel here driving around town. This doesn't feel like a big all-wheel drive off-roader. This feels like a comfortable car like any other. I will tell you, though, that Subaru does have a stiffer suspension setting than many. It's very firm, and because of that, when you do hit bumps and potholes and things, even with these softer tires, it does tend to give you something to feel, just like when we were out there on the trail. So it's a nice, comfortable driving car, but it is a stiffer chassis than you might expect in some luxury cars. In the final analysis, I'll simply tell you that this is a chassis that I really like how it feels with these softer tires on it. It still has a very firm ride over expansion joints, over cracks in the pavement, and especially off the road. It could be a little bit more forgiving there, given its off-road chops. That's just my preference, however. On the pavement, it's sporty, it's stable, it's quiet. This chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. So now it's time to talk about powertrain. What's under the hood? And if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? You can hear it, and you can tell it's a CVT, and 60. 2.5 liter 4-cylinder horizontally opposed boxer engine, 182 horsepower, 176 pound-feet of torque. This is the larger, more powerful of the 2 engines available in the Crosstrek. It has a continuously variable transmission. It's got paddle shifters. It's got the ability to give yourself simulated shift points. Depending on the drive mode, sometimes it'll do that, but most of the time when you ask for full power, it just drones on and on and on. But it is one of the better CVTs in the business. This also has auto start stop. I'm sitting here at a stop sign and the engine is stopped. I let off the gas, it starts back up. You can hear that, and off we go. Now you can defeat that. There's a button here on the touchscreen that you can turn off auto start stop. You do have to do that every time you start the car. And it's worth pointing out that in Subarus, because of the design of the engine and the way it works, the auto start stop is one of the less refined variations of it out there. This engine does have adequate horsepower. It's not fast. You saw back there when we did the acceleration, it's kind of leisurely. When you use these paddle shifters, they do give simulated shifts, but they're not real shifts. They're just kind of like these little bumps in the motion a little bit. It's kind of fun, but they're toys. Fuel economy, this is rated at 25 city, 29 highway, and 27 mpg combined, and that's actually about what I got with it this week. So it meets what it says on the EPA, at least for me it did this week. So in the final analysis, this is a powertrain that is a little bit noisy, a little bit less refined than some. Not a big fan of the CVT, but it's as good as any of them are. And with the X mode drive modes and all of the extra stuff it has for off-road, it's as good as it can be for a CVT, although I still wish for a conventional automatic transmission. This powertrain gets 4 out of 5 stars. Now a conversation about the interior of the Crosstrek Wilderness. We just had a video about 3 or 4 weeks ago talking about all of the updates on the 2024, and while the interior looks pretty familiar to most people that have been into a Subaru, over the last year or two things have changed just slightly. This particular interior is a nice combination of charcoal and gray, and you can see that in the finishes. There's a bit of a carbon fiber look trim on the dash and the door panels, and with this trim grade there's also sort of a copper gold accent on the steering wheel. We've seen that in some of the other trim grades as well. I like it. It's just a touch of brightness that kind of cheers things up in what might otherwise be a bit of an austere looking dark interior. Another thing I really love here are these rubber all-weather floor mats on the front floor, the rear floor, and in the rear cargo area. This is just cool, and it's part of the trim grade. It's standard, and yes, you're going to see some dirt down there. This is authenticity, man. I'm not some guy in a studio just showing you a car. I'm actually out in the dirt getting it dirty. So there. The seats are upholstered with what they call StarTex. It's vinyl, but it is a rugged vinyl that looks like something you might find at any outdoor store, be it a backpack, a jacket, pants, a wetsuit. They're really nice. I like them, and with this texture, they hold you good. They're a nice two-tone with a copper accent stitching, a power seat for the driver, and a manual seat for the passenger. These seats were slightly redesigned for 2024 with a different padding matrix. I find them to be a little bit more supportive. They're definitely comfortable, and I've spent all day in these seats on more than one occasion, and I'm not ready to get out of them as soon as I can. They're good. The seating position here, very car-like. I've got a nice leather-wrapped steering wheel in front of me here. This has paddle shifters on it for the CVT. We talked about that. Ahead of me is a pretty conventional instrument cluster, 2 analog dials with an LED center screen. It's sort of old school, but it does the job. Over in the center, a nice portrait-style touchscreen control command center, and we'll get to that in more detail here in a moment. Down below in the center console here, we have a wireless charger down there, and I like the fact that I can see my phone and see what's on it when it lights up. If, say, somebody sends a message and I just want to take a quick glance. Also, you'll find down there all of the connection and charging ports that you'll ever need. Further back, a conventional shifter, controls for these heated seats, cup holders down low so that you can put tall gas station style cups here and they're not going to be in your way. Storage in here, not too bad, a little bit larger than a square tissue box, a nice deep well down there to throw a lot of things in, and a little cubby right here in the front for more. Above me on this car is a conventional sunroof, and just sort of a nice feature, lets some light in, especially with this dark colored interior. The back seat of the Crosstrek is a place that won't be mistaken for a large SUV. This is based on a compact 5-door hatch. In spite of the fact that we're based on a traditional car, the seating height isn't too bad. I don't feel like I'm sitting down in a hole, and that's going a lot to the shape of this seat and the support that I've got here. These seats ahead of me are set for my height, about 5'8" to 5'9", depending on what I'm wearing for boots or shoes. I've got about 2 inches ahead of my knees at these settings, so I could have someone a little bit taller sitting back here and I would still be okay. So space back here, not too terrible. These seats are reasonably comfortable and they do have side support. There is a fold down armrest in the center with cup holders. Looking down at the back of the center console, I do have some nice charging ports, but missing are vents. A little bit of an omission in my opinion, especially again in this price range. I really look to see that, especially here in Arizona on hot days. It's nice to have AC vents in the back seat. These seats do fold down in a 60-40 split. In that cargo area, you can see that nice rubber mat. I talked about that. I love these, and they look cool too, especially there in the back. You can throw all kinds of wet, muddy gear back there and never worry about your carpeting. Underneath that, we have a near full-size spare tire. Now, yes, it is a temporary spare tire, but it is full-sized. So you can go out in the wild like we did today on our drive, cut a tire open on a rock, and still get home without having to drive funny. I love that in a car that's tailored for being off-road. So this is an interior I'm very pleased with. I like the finishes. I love these seats. They're comfortable. I like the material on them because, well, it really lives up to the lifestyle that this car is dialed in for. Yes, it doesn't have every feature known to man for this price tag, but it has a lot to offer. This interior gets 5 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is the new Starlink, which is Subaru's branding, touchscreen infotainment system, and it's also a command center as it does replace a lot of hard controls, particularly for the climate control. And so everything is integrated here. It works well, and it has hard controls for volume, for tuning, and it also has hard controls on either side for temperature. And the fan controls for the climate control are down in the center, and they're always there. They never disappear on you. So you're never going to find your climate controls hiding and buried under a menu someplace. Navigating around in this is very easy. The graphics are good. It's thoughtfully laid out, and it just works well. It's easy to learn. This does have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and they're wireless. It has Bluetooth connectivity as expected, Sirius XM, AM, FM, so a lot of feature content there. The X mode drive modes are in there, and you can set those right from the screen. There's a backup camera, as you might expect. Does it have a 360-degree surround view monitor? No. I'd like that. A car like this that's really designed for getting out in the wild and in the bush, it'd be nice to have a 360-degree monitor for backing up in tight spaces. I almost kind of expect that here. The other thing that's really missing more than anything, and it's got a lot of feature content, is navigation. It does not have native navigation. And yes, you can connect Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and get that through your phone, but what if you're out in the middle of nowhere with no cell service, which I just was today during our filming. You wouldn't really be able to access that. So this is an infotainment system that almost fires on all cylinders, but it's just missing a few things at this price point. And in a car like this, as I mentioned, no navigation, no 360-degree monitor. Those two things keep this from being a 5-star system. It gets 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, I had some fun today with this car out here in the desert, just sort of driving out on the trail, and that's what it's for. And that is really what impresses me most about this Wilderness trim grade in the Crosstrek, is it gives it everything that I really think it should have as a base model. The extra ground clearance, the tire and wheel combination here that doesn't make it a compromise. And by that I mean, when you look at all the other Crosstreks, some of which have some larger wheels and lower profile tires that are really dialed in for the street, it compromises what this vehicle's about. I mean, if you want a street car, you can get the Impreza. That's what this is, only with a lift kit and off-road chops. Why compromise it with street tires and wheels? Here you get a vehicle that's got the off-road capability, the ground clearance, the better ride, and the better handling experience that comes with this tire and wheel combination. Why wouldn't you just make all of them this way? I don't get it. I like it. I like it a lot. And so this one, fully loaded at $35,000, even at the lower prices, even here, I find this a good value. If you look at what else can you buy for $35,000 that's got this level of off-road prowess and this level of ability inside and out to take that kind of lifestyle, there's not very many things on the market. And what makes this one stand out, I think, is the fact that it's got a very small footprint. It rides and drives like a car because it is. It's not a big, heavy SUV that's top heavy like most of its competitors. This is based on a car. It's given a good lift kit, good chops underneath. And so that makes it very unique in my opinion. So I like what they've done here. And so even at this price, fully loaded, I think it's a good value. 5 out of 5 stars for value. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4.5 stars for the review. And you know what else? It goes on my buy list. Yeah, I would totally buy this. And that can't be said for all of the Crosstreks. I'm talking about the Wilderness trim grade. Because this one does have the extra mechanical abilities and the rest of the equipment that this has, it really presses my buttons. Very much like the WRX made it to our buy list last year, even though the rest of the Impreza line necessarily does not. So I like it. I like it well enough. I would buy it. So there you go. It's the last car that goes on our buy list for the 2023 calendar year. And we'll start fresh in January. Yeah. So if you like what we do, see our latest video right there. But better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.